So
Sure.
hopefully we're going live. Hey everyone, welcome. Happy
Hey,
Friday. We'll get started in 20 to 30 seconds. Let some people trickle in. Grab your lunch or wherever you're at. Get situated. Excited to have you all here and have my colleague Ed Little here. So we'll get started in a few minutes. Give us a sec. All right, Ed, you good?
yes.
Hey everyone, welcome. Friday, November 20th. We are 17 days now since the election? Is that November 3rd, right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, Ed. Wow. Wow. It took a while to get here, right? But
Oh
we're
my
here.
God.
We're here. So thanks y'all for joining us. This is a safe and just policy discussions. If you have been joining me since the beginning back in maybe July now, you know that I was doing these policy updates during session to bring to you all what's going on with our bills and other bills, and then other things going on in the public safety, criminal justice world here in California. We took a little bit of a break after session happened, and looking at what we can do to bring an effective and productive conversation to y'all. So, as a policy team for Californians for Safety and Justice, Ed Little is going to be joining us in these conversations. We're going to be doing bi-weekly or so between Ed and I, and hopefully bringing on guests, other advocates that we work with, leaders in the criminal justice space, to really talk about what's going on in the Capitol, what's going on policy world, and what's going on largely in the criminal justice, public safety, community health space. So really excited to have you all here, and hope that you continue to join us as we go on this transition period and figuring this out, what we're doing here. But excited to have you all here. Y'all know me. I'm the government affairs director for Californians for Safety and Justice. I just passed a year. November 18th was my 1 year mark. I had started a year ago, which is it's been like 5 years, but also a beautiful 5 years and beautiful year. So really happy to be here with y'all, and happy to be in conversation with Ed Little. Ed, you want to introduce yourself for the folks out there tuning in?
Sure, sure. Ed Little, policy advocate with Californians for Safety and Justice, and happy to be on here with my colleague Anthony DiMartino to talk about these very important issues with you today.
It's great to have you here, Ed. Really, in my year here, I've leaned on you so much, so it's been great to be working with you, and it's great to bring you into the fold in these discussions, and really have the people here, some of the brains behind the amazing policies that we work on. So thank you, Ed, for joining us. So today we're changing it up, right? So normally I've done policy alerts, 5 to 9 minute long, like just kind of rapid fire. This is what's going on. We're moving to a little bit more of a discussion base, so it's going to be a little bit longer, but we're going to get into the weeds on a little things. We're going to touch on a whole lot of different topics. This discussion today is really focused on the election and wrapping up the 2020 legislative session, and a little bit of a preview of what's to come, right? So we're going to just dive into it and really just remind folks of some of the policies that passed, and talk a little bit about the prop results before we get into some of the races. So I'm just going to dive in, and actually, you know what? I'm gonna freestyle really quick, because Ed, you introduced yourself, but as much as you'd like to share, I know you've done a few of these conversations, the Progress Not Prisons, with me and with Terrence on Time Done. But in case there's some folks that haven't tuned in, just take a few seconds to say a little bit more about why you do the work, what you want to share with the folks, why it's important that folks tune in and hear about what's going on at the state capitol too.
Thank you, Anthony. I am impacted by the criminal justice system. And that is one of the things that one of the critical reasons that I do this work. And I joined Californians for Safety and Justice because I saw them as an organization that demonstrated through their work their willingness to really do away with the barriers that impact people who are living with convictions. And so, it's just been my life goal to eliminate those barriers that impact those of us who've had involvement with the criminal justice system.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks so much for sharing. And I know as we get to talking today and over these discussions as we move along, we'll hear more about that. But just felt like it was important that folks hear a little bit more about your background and why this matters to y'all. So yeah, I'm going to do a little bit of a rapid fire. Just a reminder, highlight what some things that were passed in the legislature and signed into law, most that will go into effect January 1st, 2021. And then we'll talk about some of the prop results. And then Ed and I are going to highlight a few specific bills a little bit more and talk about why we think they're going to be impactful. And they're just important to us, whether we worked on them personally or we supported as CSJ and just as individuals and advocates. So, high level, if you've been following along, you know that the state has committed, I'm going to start with this, committed to closing 2 state-owned and operated prisons by, I think, 2023. This is huge, right, y'all? We're talking about shutting down prisons, talking about getting people free, talking about cost savings and being able to reallocate, right, reinvest, which if you followed our Progress Not Prisons conversation, how important that is. The Legislative Analyst's Office actually just came out with a new analysis saying, based on what's happened with COVID and laws passed, we actually may be looking at potentially being able to close 5 prisons by 2025, which would just be tremendous. We're talking about potentially in the billions of dollars of cost savings, right? So that's huge. We passed parole reform, probation reforms, great efforts by advocates, the governor, and the legislature to do that. A ton of police bills were introduced this year. Unfortunately, not a lot of them made it to the finish line, which we expect to see back in 2021. So keep following us for that. But there were quite a few bills that were signed on police reform around independent investigation of shootings, right? Banning the carotid hold. So there was some movement there, building on past reforms around transparency and use of force. We saw some sentencing reforms, right, around parole reform, compassionate release, misdemeanor diversion programs. And then we saw some reforms in the juvenile justice space, right, around expansion of Miranda rights, which I'm going to highlight after we talk a little bit about the props. And so, it was a huge year on criminal justice reform. I know Ed's been doing this a long time, so I'll let him comment on it, on his perspective. But for me, I've been doing this work in California at the state level for 5 years. 4 years as a staffer, now 1 year with CSJ. And I don't like to use this word necessarily because it's used so much, but it was unprecedented in my mind of what was accomplished in the criminal justice space this year, public safety space. Ed, do you have any thoughts on, what happened at the Capitol around criminal justice, putting into context the work that you've done in other states, right? What you saw and what we were able to accomplish this year as CJ groups?
I'm always, even before I moved to California, I was always amazed by the work that was being done in California. And that was also one of the things that inspired me to move here, was to be part of this strong advocacy community here in California that really works hard to move the needle on criminal justice policy reform. And so to see the reforms that were done or accomplished this year was just really amazing. And I'm happy to say that, one, I'm part of this team here at Californians for Safety and Justice with you, but also part of the larger advocacy community of folks who work hard to change these laws every single day.
Yeah, definitely hear that, and it is an honor to be able to work on this and work with folks like you and others that are impacted, or that they just care deeply to see folks free. And with that, I'm going to transition to our props really quick. And I know you're going to talk about Free the Vote, which was Prop 17. I'll just say, y'all, it passed. It passed overwhelmingly. This is awesome. Ed's going to highlight in a second, what it does and why it's important and impactful to him, and it just important for the state and important really for the country as we look at voting rights, right? So Prop 17 passed overwhelmingly in the state. And then Prop 20, which was another important criminal justice proposition. We were on the opposition side and saw that fail. And so that was also very important. And Prop 20 had passed, right? It would have rolled back reforms that we, as an organization and other advocates in the space, have worked so hard on around, AB 109, which was realignment back in 2010, 2011, Prop 47 from 2014, Prop 57. So, the voters weighed in again on these important criminal justice reforms, and overwhelmingly opposed Prop 20, which is absolutely huge and has ramifications too for what the work we do in the Capitol, which we'll talk a little bit about in a second. I do want to highlight our analysis as of now, and we know that the results still are being certified. Most races have been called. Most of the propositions, I think, if not all of them, have already been called. But votes are still coming in. But our analysis is showing that 51 out of 58 counties opposed Prop 20 in the majority of the state, which is just huge and just a great win for criminal justice reform. And Ed, you want to transition to talking about some of the things that caught our eye, that we were watching, that we supported, that we think is impactful. I know you wanted to highlight ACA 6 and then Prop 17. You want to talk a little bit about that, and then I'll chime in with the ACA side of things and how that works.
Sure. I mean, Prop 17 was amazing, and I think it was something that California, being a progressive state, needed to pass, particularly in this era where we are really focusing on voter disenfranchisement. And 17 was a proposition that worked towards making sure that people who were impacted by the criminal legal system, who once they released prison, could vote. And there were 50,000 people in California who have completed their prison terms and want to be able to fully participate in democracy. And this proposition allowed for that. And, it received almost, I believe, 2/3 of the vote. And so this is just like Proposition 20. This is a mandate that we want, number one, criminal justice reform, but we also want individuals who've been impacted by the criminal legal system to have their rights, their civil rights, restorated, fully restorated. And this is important because when you think about 50,000 people, how those numbers impact not only a high-profile presidential election, but also local elections. And so this is very, very, very important. And I think lastly, I'll conclude with this. I don't think people really understand how having the ability to vote in elections, local elections, statewide elections, and federal elections that impact your day-to-day life, what that means for an individual, particularly someone who has been impacted by the criminal legal system, that you feel the connection with your community and that your vote matters, and then that you're having an impact on the policies that are taking place in your community. You're talking everything from, city council person to school board.
Yeah. I mean, water board, right? I mean,
Yeah.
There's the community college board. Yeah. I mean, when you sit down to vote, there's so many things that you have an ability to affect and change. And and giving these folks a voice is so important, and important in a reentry space, right? Like thinking about feeling connected to the community and involved. So, huge ups to everyone that worked on this, right? This, Cut 50, Anti-Recidivism Coalition, Courage, CJ, Initiate Justice, SE Justice, Drug Policy Alliance, so many great groups that we have tremendous relationships with and respect for: Restore Justice, Smart Justice, Uncommon Law, and really what I wanted to highlight, because these conversations are, we're hoping to make it a little bit more of inside, baseball, so you have an understanding of what's going on, right? California has the ballot where you can put propositions, laws on the ballot so that people vote for it, right? And there's a couple different ways that happens, and the legislature has an ability to put laws on the ballot for you all to vote on. And this was ACA 6, Assembly Constitutional Amendment by Assemblymember Kevin McCarty from Sacramento, led by so many of those groups I just named, and they got this to go through the legislature and then put on the ballot. So there were actually quite a few things that were put on the ballot by constitutional amendments by legislators, but really want to highlight that this has been in the works for a long time, and that the legislative process was used to help to get people free, and then to have the voters of this great state to say, yeah, we want to see these people free the vote. So Ed, thanks so much for highlighting that. Do you have another bill or topic that you wanna highlight for the folks before we transition to talking about races?
I think SB 144 by former Senator Holly Mitchell was a very, very important bill that dealt with fines and fees, criminal fines and fees with the courts. And we know that these fines and fees impact largely poor people, communities of color, marginalized communities. And what it does is it keeps you locked into the criminal justice system, or the criminal legal system, I should say, because these fees, when an individual can't afford to pay these fees, the fees increase, and then individuals are subsequently arrested and charged more fees and given prison and jail time because they can't afford to pay these fees. And to have a bill that eliminates most of these fees and eliminates the assessment of many of these fees was groundbreaking, not only for this state but for the country. I mean, we don't have to look back that far when we see Ferguson and the impact of these sorts of criminal fees and assessments on individuals who have come in contact with law enforcement, and what that meant for their lives. And you had a whole city that was basically their budget. The foundation of their budget was these criminal fees. And so to eliminate this is definitely a step in the right direction. I mean, I'm excited about the direction we're moving in the state, and I'm happy to be part of this movement.
Yeah, definitely. I think just another opportunity to help folks get free, right? And
Sure.
not really build these systems on the backs of folks that are already struggling, and more encouraging them to feel like they're a part of the society. I wanted to highlight two things really quick before we talk about some of the races. I think I mentioned this bill briefly in one of the policy alerts back in July or August, but SB 203 by Senator Bradford has to do with Miranda rights, and making sure that young people, almost 18 and younger, 17 and younger, have to have the ability to consult with legal counsel when they're interacting with law enforcement, right? And this is just so important, and important to me personally, right? Because of my start as a volunteer, running workshops with youth in juvenile hall, and as an adult, having my own struggles at times to talk with law enforcement, and not always understanding the legal jargon. And I'm someone that works in policy, right? I couldn't imagine being a young person engaging with law enforcement, not understanding what they're saying, being afraid to talk, being afraid to say the wrong thing or not to say anything and what that means. And so, seeing this law passed and signed and build on past reforms is really important to me to make sure that we're protecting our young people, right, and we're also trying to restore some faith in the justice system, that we're not just getting people arrested for saying things that they shouldn't say, or that they didn't know they didn't need to say, or saying things that they want to say just because they think it'll help them get home, right. And I want to highlight this because I highlighted this before, but if you haven't checked out When They See Us on Netflix, it looks at the Central Park 5 story. Ava DuVernay, amazing producer, director, put this together. I think it's like a 4 or 5 part series on Netflix. We're all struggling with COVID. Get a chance to watch it. It is heavy, y'all. To be honest, I didn't finish it. I knew where it was going. I've read the stories. I've read the articles about it. So it was really hard for me to watch. But if you have never really encountered the juvenile justice system or even the justice system, you should watch this, and you'll see the trauma and hurt that we do to young people and people in general that touch the criminal justice system. And with that, I wanted to highlight again for y'all and just remind people, we're closing DJJ, y'all. We're closing the Division of Juvenile Justice. Ed, want to hear your thoughts on what this means. But, for me personally, right, I got into this work 12 years ago now as a 20-year-old at the University of Redlands in San Bernardino. First time I ever set foot as a volunteer in a juvenile hall in San Bernardino, California. I walked out, which, is a privilege that I could do as a 20-year-old. I walked out of there and I cried because we were locking kids up and throwing them away and doing just so much harm to them. And there was already so much harm, right? And I vowed that I'd do everything in my power to make sure that juvenile justice system was shut down and we weren't putting kids in cages. We supported this bill, but there were just so many amazing advocates that have been working on this issue for so long. Our head honcho, Lenore Anderson, has been working on this for decades now. And the advocates that really saw this through this last legislature, Human Rights Watch, got to shout them out, Children's Defense Fund, the Burns Institute, right, California Alliance for Youth and Community Justice, so Commonwealth. I mean, there's so many amazing groups that supported and worked on this and got this to the finish line. So, we're moving in a right direction on juvenile justice and really shifting to trauma focused, right? But Ed, I just wonder if you have any thoughts on the direction the state's moving in criminal justice, but the juvenile justice side specifically.
I think this is how we really get to turning this ship that is the criminal legal system around and moving it in the proper direction, whatever we determine that is. Particularly with the previous bill that you highlighted, juveniles having the right to an attorney. When you think about lawyers who go in the courtroom have representation, how can we have children who enter into the criminal justice system not have representation? It doesn't make sense. And we know that children, juveniles, youth are often at the tip of the spear. They are met with the tip of the spear of the criminal legal system. And so for them to go through this process, not having any idea of how to navigate this complex system, was just wrong on so many levels. And to think that, it took up until 2020 to change this just says something about us as a society. As it relates to closing down our juvenile system, I think that is again a very important step in the right direction. We do not want to create a system that pushes young people from a feeder system that feeds directly into the adult prison system. We want to work with youth to help them get the education, the counseling, the treatment, and the services they need as much as possible so that we can keep them out of this system that does not work to make them whole. It does not work to help them. And, you often hear about, people talking about programs and things of that nature. We need to provide these services to youth before kids get into trouble. We need to make sure that kids have everything they need in their communities. And that's one of the things that really makes me proud of this organization is that this is part of our mission is to make sure that the resources that communities need to be strong, to be vibrant, for folks to realize their true potential, that those resources are in community. And this is why we need youth in community to receive those resources. We don't need them locked away in some prison, in some youth prison, somewhere in some distant part of the state. We need these kids at home in community where they can be best taken care of.
Completely agree, Ed. Completely agree. We're going to transition really quick to some of the races and understanding, right, that like I said before, the election has not officially been certified just yet entirely. They have until the end of the month to do that. But if projections hold, what we're looking at as we come back to the legislature in the assembly, there's 80 members overall, right, allocated in the state. We're looking at potentially 60 Democrats, 1 independent, and 19 Republicans. So the Assembly Democrats will have a supermajority again. I'm not sure if this is like 3 or 4 years running now, but they've had a supermajority for a couple years now. And then on the Senate side, we're looking at potentially 31 Democrats and 9 Republicans. So super majorities in both houses, Democratic governor, still dealing with COVID, right? But the financial forecast is not looking as negatively as it did a few months ago, but still understanding we have a structural deficit. We're not out of the hole yet. We're Ed and I and other advocates are gonna still be looking at how do we, realize cost savings, right, in our bloated criminal justice system. But Ed and I wanted to just highlight a few things that are going to come out of this, and just provide some thoughts on what we're going to be thinking and looking at. Right, wanted to congratulate Senator Holly Mitchell, who is now going to be LA County Board Supervisor. Gonna miss her, right, Ed?
Absolutely.
Let would love to hear your thoughts on Senator Mitchell's impact at the state level, but what I want to say really quick, is what we're watching is she was the Senate budget chair, which is, one of the most powerful positions in the legislature and in the state as a whole. Did a tremendous job there. And so what that is going to mean now, right, is that a few things are going to happen. The pro tem, which I'm presuming is going to be Senator Tony Atkins from San Diego again, will have to appoint a new budget chair when they come back in December. Senator Holly Mitchell sat on a whole lot of committees, specifically to us, public safety policy committee. So there's going to be an opening there. And then there's going to have to be a special election, right, for Senator Holly Mitchell's seat. So, and then that could have dominoes that fall in other places, right? So we're going to be watching that. But Ed, would love to hear just a few thoughts you have around Senator Holly Mitchell, what she meant to us and meant to the movement, the progressive space, racial justice. Anything you'd like to share on Senator Holly Mitchell?
Senator Holly Mitchell was and is a true champion. And LA is lucky, very fortunate to have someone who truly cares about the people that she represents. And she will definitely be missed in the halls of the state capitol. Anytime that I saw Senator Mitchell on the floor talking about a specific issue, I was confident, number one, that she did her homework. She knew what she was talking about, and there was no one in the chamber that was going to challenge her on whatever piece of legislation that she was speaking on behalf of. She is a very, very, very knowledgeable person and a very passionate person for the issues that impact not only her constituents from her district, but all Californians. And it's going to be hard to replace Holly Mitchell. She was she is irreplaceable. You
Yeah.
know, I am happy to have had the opportunity to know her, to work with her and her staff, and to have her speak on behalf of many of the pieces of legislation that we advocated for. And I again, I'm happy for LA for them to have a supervisor that's going to get it done in
Yeah.
LA.
Yeah, I ditto what you said. The last thing I'll say before we talk about another LA race that's going to definitely, reverberate around the country. But I always said that she was very surgical in the way she did things.
Yeah.
Very surgical. Always had the receipts. Could always back up what she was saying.
Yeah.
My former boss, Assemblymember Weber, was always so passionate.
Mhm.
And just so articulate. And Senator Mitchell was very similar and just so surgical and could just take apart, the bill, explain it, take apart arguments, right? Rebuttal. It was what I thought of what a legislator should be like. So definitely gonna miss her. Happy for LA, like you said. But our job as the people and groups is to help other folks in their pursuit of justice as well. And so
For sure.
whoever we get into that new Senate seat, we'll be looking forward to hopefully working with them and seeing what they want to do.
Absolutely.
But yeah, Ed, tell us a little bit about this other LA race that we all were following closely. What happened there and what you think it means.
The LADA's race is that was a very important race. I don't know that people understand that race will have inevitably reverberations across the country. LA has one of the, or might be the largest DA's office
I
in the
think,
country.
yeah,
And so the policies that they make in that district, it matters. And to have a progressive DA in DA elect Gascon is going to be a game changer, not only for policies in LA County, but in the state of California as well. And so, gone are the days of those punitive policies that largely impacted poor people and marginalized communities and communities of color. And so to have a progressive DA in there that has demonstrated in formerly in San Francisco DA's office that he was an individual that takes a very common sense approach, a very smart approach to public safety. Um, is definitely a breath of fresh air. And again, when you look at the vote totals, they speak for themselves. The people have said, in California over and over again during this particular election cycle that we want to move in the direction of reforming this criminal justice system from the ground up.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. A few things I'll just mention: Gascon's, fingerprints, and a few other DAs throughout the state already, launching a progressive prosecutors alliance. Right,
Mhm.
they're already working on legislation with a few members. Right, that
Mhm.
we're looking forward to seeing around DAs disentanglement with law enforcement unions. And so, already seeing that, right? Already seeing some advocates that we know are working on Gascon's transition team, and huge shout outs to them. And so, really excited to see, like you said, what this means for the state and then also the country. The LADA is going to have a whole lot of sway on California and the country in the direction we move.
For sure.
We're about 30 something minutes in, and wanted to, kind of finish up with a little bit of a look to 2021. So we're going to talk just really briefly, Ed. I'll name some things, and if there's anything you want to bring up, but some of the policies that failed this year, that died, that ran out of time. What are we thinking could be coming back? I know, as an organization, we are still exploring, right, some of our policies. And I'll have you, high level kind of talk about one of them. You actually worked on this one that I'm going to highlight, right? But we had our bill AB 767 around police use of force, victims of police use of force, right? That died in appropriations. We're looking to, resurrect that and work with actually some of the progressive DAs, work alongside some community groups and some electeds to do this, bring this back. Some other things, that I think we're probably going to see come back. You're going to see different police reforms. That was in a year that we did see a whole lot of criminal justice reforms, and then obviously you saw all the racial injustice around police shootings, killings across the country, and the protests. California didn't get it done on some of these police bills, and so I imagine you're going to probably see quite a few of them come back. And then, Oregon, right, decriminalizing drugs, a whole bunch of drugs, if not all drugs, right? I got to go back and look at exactly which ones they decriminalize, but I got to imagine there's going to be discussions amongst advocates here in California and be like, hey, what did our neighbors to the north just do? I already know Senator Weiner is going to have a bill on, I think, psychedelics. So we'll see that. But Ed, what do you think for 2021, just as a preview, right? Because over the next several weeks and months during these discussions, we're going to be highlighting bills that we're going to be working on and things that we're hearing. But any previews you got for the folks?
Well, to your point, last year's bill, AB 767, which was a bill where we wanted to expand services and opportunities to people who were victims of police violence.
Yeah.
In that bill, we wanted to make sure that, people who experience police violence had access to the services they needed. And there were a number of barriers that exist within the current system that prevent them from accessing those services. And we're trying to work to address those changes, while at the same time, one of the key components is making sure that we center the voices of those who have been victimized. That is critical to the work that we do in all areas, but particularly in the victims space, is we make sure that their voices drive and center our work. Also, we're looking at expanding our work on our previous legislation around AB 1076, where we automated the expungement process. And we just want to forecast for you, expect some big things from us in 2021, where we are looking at building upon the success that we had with this particular bill last year, that we're going to build upon that. And we're going to be looking for a lot of support from all of the advocates out there to really pass some groundbreaking piece of legislation.
Yeah, let's get some more people free, right, Ed?
Absolutely.
And so as we wrap up, our next discussion. Well, first I want to highlight actually some more insider baseball stuff, right? So as we look to officially have all the results certified, technically, the legislature has not completely closed their 2019-2020 session, right? I think that happens November 30th. And then there's going to be a little bit of span from November 30th till December 7th. December 7th, the legislators that have been officially certified that they won their races will still figuring this out, right, because of COVID. But traditionally, they come to the legislature, they come to the Capitol, and they get sworn in. It's a great event generally for their families to attend and be them sworn in as senators or assembly members, and then officially kick off the 2021-2022 legislative session. And so that day is the official day bills can be start to be introduced, December 7th. So, when we come back in a couple weeks, we'll highlight, obviously, if there are any big changes in races, and then also what legislation is already getting introduced, and then where we're at. And then we're going to still talk to y'all a little bit more about, how does policy really happen? How does policy get made? in the state of California, right? I tell people all the time, like, if my government class, which I enjoyed and I learned quite a bit about the federal level, if my government class had kind of been a little more like this, insider baseball, right, of how things actually happen and work, I probably would have got involved younger, to be honest. And so we want to bring that to y'all. And so I hope y'all continue to join us as we facilitate these conversations, and look to also bring some guests on. So it's not just Ed and I talking, even though I'm good with that, talking with Ed, but I think hearing from some other folks and perspectives will be important for all of us as well. Ed, anything you want to say before we wrap up?
I just want to say thank you for having me join you in this important discussion. I think this is going to be helpful to a lot of people who may not be in the weeds as much as we are on this work, but to get a very high level examination of policy in the state of California, particularly around criminal justice and the work that we're focused on, I think will be very helpful to a lot of people. So I'm happy to be part of this discussion.
Yeah, great to have you, Ed. Great to always appreciate our conversations, and just good to be talking and in fellowship with folks. So, thanks everyone for tuning in, and hope you all have a great, blessed Friday as well as you can right now during COVID. Stay safe, and remember, Black Lives Matter.